What truly happens when loyalty collides with destiny on a tower high above the sleeping castle? The air bites with cold, torches flicker against stone, and somewhere in the dark, two minds sharpen like blades. You probably won't survive this, but you'll understand it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm really curious, from which part of the world are you watching this video? Write your country in the comments. Let's see how far this little story has traveled. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the tower's hush, watching the moon drape itself across Luna Lovegood's pale hair like a blessing it forgot to give anyone else. She hums quietly, a tune you half recognize and half imagine, something between a lullaby and a conspiracy. The castle around her sighs with centuries of sleeplessness. Even the portraits seem to lean closer, listening. Luna speaks to no one, or perhaps to the air, asking it if dreams have weight when they fall. You almost laugh, but she's the kind of person who makes nonsense sound like it could file a tax return. Somewhere below, the kitchens clatter, proof that the world continues to make sandwiches, even during existential crises. Yet up here, the night feels like an exam you didn't study for, and Luna, maddeningly calm, already has the answers written in invisible ink. The owl she keeps beside her tilts its head, mirroring her serenity. When she turns to you, her eyes catch the moonlight and seem to ask a question your mind refuses to translate. For a fleeting second, you understand that some people don't live in the world. They live around it, like constellations circling something brighter than belief itself. The next morning tastes like candle smoke and leftover dreams as you trail behind Luna through the corridors of Ravenclaw Tower. She walks as if gravity is a rumor, her bare feet whispering across cold stone, a living contradiction wrapped in mismatched socks and perfect indifference. You try to keep up, but Luna has a habit of ignoring the concept of straight lines. Her version of navigation involves following echoes, not maps. The portraits watch her with cautious curiosity, like librarians who've caught a child rearranging reality by color instead of alphabet. Most people don't listen properly, she says, brushing a hand against the banner above the stairwell. It ripples, though no wind moves. Somewhere in the fabric, a faint voice answers back. You freeze because either the cloth is speaking or you're hallucinating before breakfast again, both plausible options. Luna tilts her head, eyes narrowing in delight. They remember, she whispers, and you realize she means the banners themselves. Every stitch a witness to arguments, secrets, and the occasional spilled pumpkin juice. Historically speaking, Hogwarts textiles did absorb traces of enchantment, though scholars still debate whether they retain memory or simply mold. One historian from 1893 wrote that banners weep when burned, which feels both poetic and deeply unsettling. You want to ask her why she believes such things, but Luna simply shrugs, as if belief were a hobby, not a commitment. Passing the marble bust of Rowena Ravenclaw, she pauses. She was clever, Luna says softly, but never kind to herself. It's one of those statements that feels like gossip from another lifetime. You almost make a joke about house pride, but the words stick in your throat. Somewhere, deep in the stones beneath your feet, you swear you hear the castle sigh. A long, slow exhale of memory, too ancient to care whether you believe it or not. When Luna finally decides to open the door, it isn't really a door. It's a hesitation in the air, a spot that exhales when you look directly at it. The room of requirement seems to wake up just for her, stretching like an old cat, rearranging its bones into comfort and quiet rebellion. You step inside, and it's nothing like you remember. The place hums, as if alive, breathing softly through the walls. Strings of dirigible plums hang from the ceiling, glowing faintly violet. There's a teapot floating in midair that keeps pouring itself. And in one corner sits a large corkboard titled, Things People Refuse to Believe in, But Should. You take a step closer. Sketches of invisible creatures, letters written to the moon, and a rather ambitious plan to build a mechanical thestral powered by music. It's hard to tell whether she's a scientist or a poet who took a wrong turn during an astronomy lecture. On the desk lies a photograph of Luna with her friends, Harry, Hermione, Neville, Ginny, all smiling through dust and war. Someone's drawn tiny halos above their heads in glitter ink. She notices your gaze and says, "Sometimes I miss them, but then I remember they never really left. They just became part of the story." You're not sure if she means memory, death, or the messy middle ground historians prefer to label as legacy. A quick fact. Historians still argue about whether post-war Hogwarts rebuilt faster due to magical cooperation or simply teenage overachievement, a debate more heated than any Quidditch match. Luna doesn't care about footnotes. She opens a small box and shows you a feather made of silver thread. "A gift from a dream," she says. And though you're tempted to laugh, something inside you hushes instead. The air smells faintly of tea, chalk, and moonlight, a strange combination that somehow makes sense here. The floor creaks not under weight, but under memory. One of the jokes you tell yourself to stay sane is that maybe the room has a better personality than most people you know. The truth, Luna explains without saying it, is that belief can be architecture if you're brave enough to build with it. You look around and think that maybe Hogwarts itself survives because people like her keep reimagining its walls into forgiveness. There's a soft noise, like the heartbeat of a dream, and for once silence doesn't feel empty, it feels full. It begins with a sound that shouldn't be possible, a hum too soft to belong to machinery, too deliberate to belong to wind. Luna hears it first, of course. She always does. You follow her through the empty corridors, the castle shifting around you like it knows something you don't. The torches flicker, painting strange shapes on the walls, shapes that seem to glance back when you aren't looking directly at them. "It's close," Luna whispers, her eyes shining with that curious mix of serenity and chaos that makes you question whether she's brave or just profoundly bad at self-preservation. You pass the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy attempting ballet with trolls, and even they look nervous tonight. The hum grows stronger, vibrating through your ribs like a slow drumbeat from the heart of the castle itself. Somewhere deep down, a rational voice mutters about acoustics and drafty hallways. But another voice, the one Luna always seems to feed, insists that some songs are only audible to those who still believe in nonsense. And you, against your better judgment, are starting to hum along. The trail leads to an old classroom, abandoned since the war. Dust lies thick as snowfall across broken desks and forgotten quills. Luna kneels, presses her ear to the floorboards, and smiles. "They've been hiding here," she says softly, as though greeting an old friend. "Who?" you ask, your tone halfway between sarcasm and self-defense. "The crumple-horned snorkack, obviously," she replies, as if you'd just asked where gravity comes from. You try to form a retort, but she's already opening her bag, producing a small silver flute carved with runes that pulse faintly in the half-light. When she plays, the note isn't a sound, it's a shimmer. The air bends, colors blur, and suddenly, the room is breathing. Something moves beneath the dust, rippling like fabric underwater. You tell yourself it's a trick of the light, or perhaps caffeine withdrawal manifesting as wildlife. But then it looks at you. Two eyes, too luminous to belong to anything ordinary, peer through the air like reflections in broken glass. Luna doesn't flinch. "You're real," she murmurs, not as a question, but as a welcome. The creature, if that word even applies, seems built of contradictions. Translucent fur that glows from within, antlers that shimmer like starlight, hooves that make no sound. It steps closer, and the temperature drops, not in fear, but reverence. You feel the kind of awe ancient sailors must have felt seeing land for the first time, except the land here looks back. "It shouldn't exist," you whisper, and Luna just smiles. Most meaningful things don't. You want to laugh, to dismiss it all, to reclaim the solid world of rules and reason. But the creature snorts softly, releasing a burst of light that smells faintly of honey and static. Here's your mainstream historical fact, because even wonder deserves context. In the 17th century Europe, natural philosophers often mistook narwhal tusks for unicorn horns, selling them to kings for the price of castles. The human instinct to worship the improbable clearly predates Hogwarts, and yet staring at this shimmering being before you, the old rationalist within you feels almost jealous of those fools who believed. Luna steps closer until she's nearly touching its snout. It lowers its head, antlers humming like tuning forks in the air. They hide in faith, she says. That's why nobody finds them. People stopped having enough of it to see properly. You almost respond with another quip, but the words die when the creature turns its gaze on you. There's no malice there, only recognition, the uncomfortable kind that implies your disbelief has been noted and forgiven. Then, in a blink, it's gone. The room exhales again, leaving behind only dust and the faint smell of rain. You and Luna stand in silence. She tucks the flute away and hums, seemingly content. You, meanwhile, are trapped somewhere between scientific curiosity and a mild existential crisis. Well, you manage finally, that was either the most convincing hallucination of my life, or I now owe several zoologists an apology. Luna grins. Oh, they wouldn't believe you anyway. Most people don't want new creatures. They want new excuses. You snort, unable to help yourself. You should put that on a mug. I did, she says cheerfully, but it disappeared. Probably got offended. There's one of your light jokes. You keep count because it's easier than keeping faith. As you walk back toward the main hall, the castle feels different, warmer somehow, as if approving of your accidental awakening. You wonder how many ghosts have shared Luna's view over the centuries, seeing things no one else dared to name. Historians debate whether Hogwarts itself has consciousness, whether the building's enchantments have evolved beyond magic into personality. The dominant scholarly opinion says no, though one eccentric professor once argued that architecture built on intention inevitably dreams. It's a debate still unresolved, mostly because those who try to measure it end up getting lost in staircases that weren't there yesterday. You and Luna would fit right in. When you reach the landing overlooking the Great Hall, dawn is beginning to bloom through the high windows. The light turns everything fragile, the cobwebs, the portraits, even your own doubt. Luna leans against the railing, gazing at the sky as if counting invisible constellations. Do you ever get tired of not being believed? You ask. She tilts her head. No, she says simply. Truth doesn't need an audience. It just needs company. You file that away for later, somewhere between wise and emotionally suspicious. The breakfast bell rings below. Someone shouts about burnt toast. The world resumes its scheduled absurdities. You realize that Luna doesn't collect proof. She collects wonder, the kind that keeps reality flexible. As you both descend the stairs, a stray beam of sunlight catches on something clinging to your sleeve. A single silver hair, impossibly fine, glimmering like frozen moonlight. You stare at it until it fades into nothing, evaporating before your eyes. You laugh softly, half in disbelief, half in surrender. Maybe that's how magic survives, not in wands or spells, but in the tiny compromises between skepticism and awe. Luna doesn't look back, but she seems to know exactly what you're thinking. See? She calls over her shoulder. You just have to stop arguing with the evidence. You follow her into the light, and for the first time, the castle seems to hum along, breathing with you. Its heartbeat faint but undeniable. Somewhere far above, in the rafters, something unseen stirs again, waiting for the next person foolish enough to listen. The day begins with Luna balancing a teacup on her head. Not as a joke, mind you, but as a legitimate method of aligning thought currents. You watch from across her cluttered kitchen, trying to decide whether she's an eccentric genius or a walking performance art piece sponsored by chaos itself. The house is a museum of cheerful disobedience, every surface occupied by either a book, a plant, or something hovering gently between dimensions. The ceiling fan carries small charms that clink like distant wind chimes, and there's an unsettlingly large radish wearing spectacles on the windowsill. That's Professor Rootbert, Luna explains, pouring tea as if this were a perfectly normal sentence. The tea smells faintly of cinnamon, starlight, and impending revelation. She hands you a cup, adding 3 sugar cubes that dissolve into faintly glowing bubbles. You take things too seriously, she says, eyes sparkling. That's why you miss the good bits. You want to object, but you accidentally inhale a bubble, and now you can literally taste your own confusion. Luna grins. See? It's working already. The dirigible plums hang outside in her garden, orange, bulbous fruit floating lazily on shimmering threads. Luna insists they improve open-mindedness, though most botanists classify them as magical nonsense suspended in denial. She plucks one and hands it to you, its skin glowing softly like a lantern caught between worlds. Bite, she commands. You do, mostly out of politeness, and instantly regret it. The flavor is a combination of citrus, candle wax, and a poorly timed philosophy lecture. She giggles, that strange silver laugh that makes the world temporarily forget how to judge itself. You'll feel it later, she says. That's when the truth usually hits. It's both comforting and threatening. While your taste buds recover, Luna begins rearranging teacups into constellations on the table. The problem with truth, she muses, is that it refuses to stay still. People keep trying to frame it like a painting, when really it's more like tea. It changes depending on what you steep it in. You nod sagely, pretending you understand, but internally, you're wondering whether this counts as breakfast or therapy. A quick mainstream historical fact for flavor. During the Renaissance, physicians genuinely prescribed laughter as a medical treatment, claiming it balanced the 4 humors. It's a small comfort to know that Luna's methods, however bizarre, have at least a few centuries of precedent. You mention this, hoping to sound clever, and she claps her hands. Exactly, and humor's just a spell we forgot how to name. She looks absurdly proud of this idea, and you realize that she might actually be right. After all, the war ended, people rebuilt, and laughter returned, not because of potions, but because of absurd resilience. Besides, Luna adds, stirring her tea with a twig, if we only did what made sense, we'd still think the world was flat and women couldn't cast spells. Point taken. Then she tells you the real purpose of the dirigible plum. They remind us not to edit the impossible out of our lives. You blink. You mean like optimism? No, she says with exaggerated patience, like possibility. Optimism expects, possibility just invites. You're tempted to argue semantics, but get distracted by a floating teaspoon that seems to be nodding in agreement. The garden beyond her window sways in time with her words, every plant leaning closer like eager students. Do you ever think, she continues, that maybe imagination isn't escape, but rebellion? Every time we believe something new, we make reality a little less smug. You nearly choke on your tea laughing. That might be the most Ravenclaw sentence I've ever heard. Thank you, she beams, as though you've just knighted her. There's a small pause where neither of you speaks. The silence feels kind, the kind that only exists between people who trust absurdity more than logic. You glance outside. The plums drift lazily, glowing like daydreams refusing to clock out. What if none of this is real, you ask? She tilts her head. That would be fine. At least it's consistent. The laugh that follows is gentle but sharp enough to cut through doubt. She has this strange ability to turn nonsense into emotional architecture, to build meaning where reason fears to tread. It's infuriating and comforting at once. She walks to a shelf lined with jars of unknown origin, each labeled with names like Whimsy Extract, Ethereal Marmalade, and Bottled Apology, aged 14 years. From one, she takes a seed the size of a raindrop and presses it into your palm. Plant that the next time you think you're done growing. You stare at it, wondering whether it's symbolic or just another prank. Does it actually grow? You ask. Only if you forget where you buried it, she replies, with that disarming smile that manages to sound both innocent and cosmically threatening. That's light joke number 2, though by now you've stopped keeping score. A sudden wind rushes through the open window, rustling parchment and lifting the smell of tea and soil. You'd swear the plums outside move closer, orbiting the window frame as if drawn by her words. They like stories, Luna says, watching them sway. Most plants do, you know. Photosynthesis is just sunlight listening politely. Somewhere, a distant clock chimes, though it feels more like the house reminding you that time is only a suggestion. You notice a portrait on the wall. Xenophilius Lovegood, Luna's father, his eyes twinkling beneath wild hair. He believed in everything, Luna says softly, even when it cost him. Her voice tightens, just slightly. That's the risk of curiosity. It asks for devotion. You recognize the shadow behind her calm, the kind that only people who've already lost something precious can carry gracefully. To lighten the air, you point at the floating radish. Does Professor Rootbert lecture? Luna's eyes widen. Only on Thursdays. She says it with such sincerity that you burst out laughing. It's ridiculous, and yet somehow necessary. The world feels less fragile when it allows room for absurd professors and fruit that philosophize. You're laughing differently now, she observes. Before, you laughed like a skeptic. Now you laugh like someone who's accidentally learned something. You want to argue, but she's right again. That's joke number 3, if you're still counting. And here's your quirky historical tidbit. In 12th century France, some monasteries banned jokes during meals, believing humor distracted monks from divine contemplation. Yet one abbot reportedly allowed a single jester to remain. His reasoning being, God made laughter, the devil only made paperwork. Luna would have liked that man. You mention it, and she grins. Then maybe I've been studying theology this whole time. As the morning stretches into gold, you realize the lesson of the dirigible plum isn't about fruit or even belief. It's about permission. Permission to find wisdom in nonsense, peace in chaos, and meaning in laughter that doesn't need an explanation. When Luna finally speaks again, it's barely above a whisper. If you want to understand the world, you have to let it surprise you. She takes another sip of tea, nodding to herself. The problem with most people is they stopped being amazed the moment they learned how to spell it. The room tilts slightly, and for a second you can almost see it. The invisible machinery of wonder she's been trying to teach you to hear. The plums outside glow brighter, the tea hums softly, and somewhere in the rafters, you swear the air itself chuckles. You don't know whether the dirigible plum actually improves open-mindedness, but you're certain of one thing. You'll never eat a piece of fruit again without expecting it to start a conversation. Night doesn't fall at Hogwarts so much as it settles, a slow exhale that seeps into every stone, and tonight it feels heavier than usual. You and Luna move through corridors washed in silver moonlight, the torches flickering as if gossiping about old battles. The war may be over, but the castle still carries the tremor of remembered screams in its staircases, a faint hum that refuses to quiet. Luna walks ahead, serene as ever, her wand tip glowing faintly blue, as if she's lighting a candle for the past instead of scaring it away. The dark isn't evil, she says over her shoulder. It's just tired. You snort softly, because leave it to Luna to give exhaustion a moral dimension, but something about her tone makes you stop joking halfway. You follow her toward the astronomy tower, that place of thin air and heavy history. She stops where the floor still bears faint scorch marks, relics from the night everything changed. Funny, she murmurs, how places remember better than people. You nod, pretending you understand. But the truth is that no one really knows how Luna keeps walking through ruins without letting them cut her feet. She sits on the parapet, legs dangling into nothingness, eyes reflecting constellations that haven't decided whether to forgive humanity yet. Do you ever wonder, she begins, why fear is so loud and hope whispers? You shrug, defaulting to logic. Volume's not proof of importance. Exactly, she says, which is why the loudest feelings are usually the least trustworthy. You want to clap ironically, but the moment is too fragile to survive sarcasm. Somewhere below, the lake sighs, the ripples moving like pages being turned. Luna points upward, tracing invisible shapes. That one's the dreaming thestral, she says. It only appears to those who've seen beauty survive pain. You squint. seeing nothing but a bunch of random dots, which is apparently the entire basis of astronomy. You made that up, you say. Of course, she answers, but that doesn't mean it's not true. There's joke number 1, though it hides under something wiser than laughter. The wind howls through the parapets, cold enough to make your eyes water, but Luna doesn't shiver. During the war, she continues, people thought bravery meant charging into fire. But real courage is standing still long enough to feel everything and not let it ruin you. You think about that, the weight of it pressing down until you almost miss her next sentence. Besides, crying's cheaper than therapy. Joke number 2, her humor's always like that, gentle, perfectly timed, and sharp enough to leave a mark hours later. She pulls something from her bag, a small wooden box etched with runes, and opens it. Inside lies a lump of glass, cracked, glowing faintly from within. A piece of a shattered charm, she explains. I kept it after the battle. It hums when the world gets too quiet. The sound is faint, a vibration you feel more than hear. It's beautiful in a way that feels slightly illegal. It's a reminder, Luna says, that broken things still sing. You sit beside her, careful not to intrude on whatever private ritual she's conducting with the stars. Do you think the nightmares ever end, you ask? No, she says, but they get bored eventually. There's joke number 3, though you both pretend it's philosophy. The moon shifts higher, silver bleeding into pale blue. Luna hums a song you don't recognize, a melody with no beginning and no mercy. When I was little, she says, I used to dream of creatures that fed on laughter. My father said they came during wars to remind us not to run out of jokes. You raise an eyebrow. That's horrifying. Only if you stop laughing, she replies. Otherwise, they stay friendly. You're beginning to suspect the woman has weaponized absurdity into religion. Here's your mainstream historical fact, because Luna insists knowledge is a better bedtime snack than cookies. During the Blitz in London, people held underground sing-alongs in bomb shelters, believing that laughter and music could literally strengthen the structure of morale. Psychologists later found that humor lowers stress hormones and even steadies the heartbeat. So technically, Luna says, giggles are medical. You sip the thought like tea, realizing how easily she can turn science into poetry without breaking rhythm. The air grows colder, sharper, and the stars above seem to pulse in time with her words. They're watching, she whispers suddenly. Who? Our memories, she says, and somehow that's worse than any ghost story. The wind brings a sound, soft, rhythmic, almost like wings. You peer into the darkness, and something drifts through the air, half light, half shadow. It hovers near Luna, tiny and trembling, shaped like a bird but made of mist and ink. Dream wings, she breathes. They appear when hope gets restless. The creature lands briefly on her wrist, feathers dissolving into sparkles that smell faintly of wet parchment and honey. Beautiful, you whisper. Unreal, she corrects. That's what makes them useful. You realize with mild panic that you're starting to understand her. The scholarly debate for tonight. Philosophers still argue whether dreams are random neural firings or emotional housekeeping. Luna would insist they're postcards from parallel versions of ourselves that refuse to give up. Some dreams are warnings, she says. Others are rehearsals. The clever ones are both. You want to ask which category hers fall into, but she's already gone somewhere inside her mind, that strange sanctuary where logic needs a visitor's pass. You look at her profile against the starlight and think she doesn't really belong to the world. She rents space in it out of politeness. The creature fades, leaving behind a shimmer that clings to your clothes. Proof, you say, trying to sound rational. Evidence, Luna corrects, is what the unimaginative call miracles when they're forced to admit defeat. It's the kind of line that should sound smug, but she says it like an apology. The castle groans softly as if agreeing. You remember the first time you met her, how easily she ignored the hierarchy of sense and nonsense. That same energy still burns in her, like a candle that refuses to admit it's out of wax. She stands suddenly and stretches, the movement fluid, feline. "You know what frightens people most about me?" she asks, voice soft. "I forgive too quickly. They mistake it for foolishness, but really it's laziness. Anger's exhausting." You laugh, though it comes out more like a sigh. "That's one way to put it." She smiles. History agrees. Anger writes the first draft. Forgiveness publishes the sequel. She starts walking down the spiral steps, pausing only to add, "And editors are overrated anyway." You follow, because honestly, who wouldn't? Halfway down, she stops before an old suit of armor, its visor dented, one gauntlet missing. "He fought," she says quietly. "We don't know his name, but he remembers ours." You blink, unsure whether she's joking again, until the armor emits a faint metallic creak, almost like a bow. "Don't do that," you whisper. "He's polite," Luna insists. "Politeness transcends death." Somewhere, an unseen ghost coughs in approval. As you descend into the corridors again, the torches flare brighter. "You ever notice," she says, "how light gets nervous when it's watched?" "That's not how physics works," you reply. "That's exactly what physics said before quantum mechanics," she shoots back. You concede the point. The air smells of dust and something faintly sweet, the scent of forgotten optimism. Luna pauses before a window and gazes outside, where dawn is beginning to fracture the night. "When dreams outstare the dark," she says softly, "it means they've learned patience." You realize she's not talking about sleep anymore. She's talking about survival, about the small acts of imagination that hold broken worlds together. You remember your promise to keep this all rational and then promptly abandon it. Because standing beside her, watching the first light spill through the fog, you understand that logic can't compete with serenity this stubborn. "So, what now?" you ask. "Now," she says, "we wait for the sun to remember us." She hums again, a tune equal parts lullaby and prophecy, and you feel something uncoil inside your chest, something you'd mistaken for apathy but was really exhaustion. The castle sighs one final time, settling into peace. You think maybe that's what Luna's been teaching all along. Not how to escape the dark, but how to make friends with it until it forgets its job. The first rays of dawn kiss the stones, and Luna closes her eyes, whispering, "See? Even light knows when to listen." Morning arrives late, as if ashamed to interrupt the kind of quiet that only follows a long surrender. The castle smells faintly of ash and dew, that strange mixture of endings and new beginnings, and you find Luna in the greenhouse, surrounded by seedlings that appear to be judging her. She's kneeling on the floor, wand tucked behind one ear, humming something that sounds like a lullaby for plants. "They grow better when they're entertained," she says without looking up. You consider pointing out that chlorophyll doesn't have a sense of humor, but you've already learned the futility of applying logic to Luna before breakfast. The sun pushes through the glass panes, catching in the cobwebs like strands of spun gold. Everything feels fragile but not weak, like the world has chosen to trust itself again, one leaf at a time. "The war's over," you say softly, not as a fact but as a prayer you still don't quite believe. "For some people," she replies. "For others, it's just quieter." She gestures to a cluster of odd flowers shaped like miniature trumpets. "These only bloom after storms," she explains. "They like the taste of thunder." You raise an eyebrow. "Scientific proof?" "Taste buds," she says seriously, then winks. "There's your first joke, subtle and reckless." You sit beside her, careful not to crush anything living or metaphorical. For a long time, neither of you speaks. The silence isn't empty. It's occupied by memory, thick as honey. "Do you ever get tired of being the hopeful one?" you ask. "Hope isn't tiring," Luna says, tying her hair up with a ribbon that looks suspiciously like it's breathing. "It's just inconvenient. People think it means pretending things are fine, but really, it means noticing they're not and planting something anyway." She pulls a small box from her pocket, opening it to reveal a scattering of seed-like stones. Ash seeds, she says. They grow into something only if you water them with forgiveness. You laugh quietly. You're making that up. Probably, she admits. But doesn't it sound worth trying? That's joke number 2. The air smells of wet soil and the kind of peace that makes you nervous, like the calm right before realization. You watch her work, her movements delicate but unhurried, as if each motion is an argument against despair. Somewhere outside, a bird sings, unaware it's part of a sermon. Here's your mainstream historical fact, delivered without apology. After the First World War, European villages held silence feasts where survivors ate together without speaking, believing the absence of words could mend what language had broken. Luna would have fit right in, humming through the meal, translating grief into melody. Words tire easily, she says, as though eavesdropping on your thoughts. Silence lasts longer. It listens better. You realize that for Luna, silence isn't the absence of sound. It's a choir that forgot its conductor. The greenhouse trembles slightly as a breeze sweeps through, scattering petals like confetti at a wedding between sanity and surrender. You help her gather them, and she grins. Nature's version of applause, she says. Joke number 3, though it arrives dressed like poetry. You find yourself smiling back, feeling something unfamiliar. Contentment without certainty. Luna pours water into a cracked pot, and for a moment, you both watch the soil darken, a tiny act of faith disguised as gardening. When my father's house burned, she says suddenly, voice barely above a whisper, I thought the silence afterward would swallow me. But then I realized it wasn't silence, it was space. You wait. Space for what? For remembering kindly. She looks up, eyes reflecting the sunlight like twin constellations rearranging themselves into forgiveness. Grief, she continues, is a language too few study properly. Everyone wants to translate it, but no one wants to speak it. You think of your own losses, the ones you keep folded neatly under logic, and you understand that she isn't talking about mourning the dead. She's talking about surviving the living. Love, she says, almost to herself, always passes the exam. It just refuses to follow the syllabus. The line hangs in the air, absurd and perfect. Somewhere, a potted mandrake sneezes in agreement. The scholarly debate embedded in her words could fuel generations of theorists. Is love an act of reason or rebellion? Philosophers write treatises, poets cheat by living it. Luna just shrugs and keeps watering her plants, winning the argument by refusing to have it. The quiet stretches again, soft but not empty, and you realize this silence, the one she's been teaching you to hear, isn't made of absence, but abundance. It's filled with patience, understanding, and a little bit of tea steam. Then, just when you think the lesson is over, she stands abruptly and dusts off her hands. Time to let them rest, she says, nodding toward the plants. They've had enough existential conversation for one morning. You follow her out into the courtyard, blinking against the sunlight. The air tastes new, like parchment before it's written on. The students are returning to their routines, some laughing, some pretending not to notice their healing. Hogwarts hums quietly underfoot, a living memory still learning to forgive itself. Luna stops by the lake and sits on the grass, pulling her shoes off as if the earth has been waiting for her toes. Do you think it remembers? She asks, nodding toward the water. Everything, you say without thinking. She smiles faintly. Good. Then we don't have to. You lie beside her, watching the reflection of clouds drift lazily across the surface. You ever wonder why life insists on continuing? You ask. She tilts her head. Maybe because it hasn't found a better hobby yet. The laugh that escapes you feels earned. A breeze ripples across the lake, carrying the scent of lilac and old parchment. When people talk about peace, Luna says, they imagine quiet. But peace is actually very noisy. It's the sound of everything deciding not to fight anymore. You glance at her, wanting to remember that line forever. You should write that down, you say. I did, she replies, but the quill got emotional, and ran away. That's joke number 4. She's out of quota, but rules were never her concern. You close your eyes, letting the warmth soak in, and for a moment, the war feels like a rumor told by people who never met her. You think about how strange it is that the loudest lessons come from the quietest teachers. Luna stretches her arms toward the sky, fingers grazing sunlight. Healing, she says, isn't about returning to who we were. It's about outgrowing who we had to be. The words drift between you, and the wind carries them off, scattering them like seeds. In the end, there's nothing profound left to say. The silence has earned its place. The storm has left its receipts. You both sit there, barefoot and unbothered, while the castle hums softly behind you, a lullaby for those who finally stopped pretending they were fine. The flowers in the greenhouse nod in the breeze as if applauding an invisible ending. Somewhere, an owl calls, and for the first time in years, it sounds like a benediction instead of a warning. The owl arrives just after sunset, feathers dusted with rain and official disappointment. Its beak carries a wax-sealed envelope marked with the ministry's crest, a symbol that somehow manages to look both pompous and apologetic. Luna takes it without surprise, murmuring a thank you that sounds more like sympathy than courtesy. "They've remembered me again," she says, tearing it open with her thumbnail. Inside is a politely worded request for her expert testimony regarding archival inconsistencies from the war. You suspect that's bureaucratic code for, "We found something weird and hope you'll make it sound poetic." She sighs and motions for you to follow. "We're going to the basement," she declares in the same tone other people reserve for. "We're going to the beach." The ministry's archive smells like dust, regret, and lemon polish. Endless shelves stretch into the dark, lined with boxes labeled confidential, top secret, and probably cursed. A clerk hands Luna a trembling folder as though it might bite. "They said this was lost for 20 years, he whispers. "It shouldn't even exist." She opens it calmly, skimming the pages as if reading old love letters. You catch glimpses of familiar names, students, spells, dates that history books polished clean. "They rewrote everything," she says softly. "Took out the mistakes, the kindness, the small rebellions." You peer over her shoulder and spot a photograph of Hogwarts during the war, edited to remove the broken windows. "Apparently even memory needs good lighting," she adds dryly. That's joke number 1, weary but accurate. Here's your historical fact. During post-war reconstruction, entire sections of wizarding history were censored under the Preservation of Public Confidence Act. The official excuse was morale. The unofficial one was embarrassment. The truth, Luna says, is allergic to tidy endings. She finds a page marked expunged evidence, non-verified entities, and frowns. The list includes thestrals, spectral children, and, of course, the crumple-horned snorkack. "They erased what didn't fit," she murmurs. "That's not archiving, that's editing." She glances at you. You know what happens when we forget the impossible. Reality gets lazy. In one corner of the file, a faint sketch catches her attention. A diagram labeled Cognitive Echo Experiment, Department of Mysteries. It shows something like a mirror that records emotions instead of images. "They tried to measure memory," she says, awe in her voice. "Imagine that, bottling nostalgia, selling it by the ounce." She laughs once, softly, and adds, "The tragedy of bureaucracy is that it always wants to alphabetize the human heart." Joke number 2, though it lands like philosophy. She closes the file gently and hands it back to the clerk. "You'll keep this safe?" she asks. He nods nervously. "Good," she says, "but don't trust it." Files have a habit of rewriting themselves when no one's looking. As you leave the archive, the torches flicker behind you, and for a fleeting moment the boxes seem to whisper, not in warning, but in relief. Outside, the rain has stopped. Luna tilts her face toward the sky. "History isn't written by the victors," she says. "It's written by whoever remembers the footnotes." You look at her, wondering whether she's sad or proud. She smiles faintly. Probably both. You find Luna sitting by the window of her father's rebuilt house, sunlight flickering through colored glass and scattering tiny rainbows across the floor. She's sketching something, an outline of wings maybe, or an idea pretending to be art. The table is cluttered with teacups, quills, and a half-finished article titled The Anatomy of Hope. She doesn't look up when you enter, only says, "You came at the right time." The world's pretending to make sense again. It needs supervision. You laugh softly, because that's Luna. 1 part prophet, 2 parts punchline. Her hair catches the light, and for a fleeting second, she looks like she's glowing from the inside out. "Do you ever get tired of being right?" you ask. "Constantly," she says. "It's exhausting being everyone's favorite lunatic." There's joke number 1, bittersweet as always. On the wall hangs a framed photograph of her friends, the ones who didn't make it back and the ones who did. The smiles are real, but you can see the ghostly outlines of absence around them. Luna follows your gaze. "Sometimes," she says, "I think love is just grief that learned better manners." You don't know how to respond, so you sit beside her, letting the silence do the talking. The air smells like honey and ink. She taps her quill against the parchment. "You know," she continues, "truth isn't about proof. It's about courage. People think lying is the opposite of truth, but really, it's fear." You ask quietly, "And what are you afraid of?" Luna smiles. "That kindness won't survive me." It's not melodramatic. It's matter of fact, like the weather. She turns back to her drawing, an intricate pattern of hearts, each one connected by delicate lines. "They're maps," she explains. "Every person has a secret heart, one they don't show anyone. Mine used to hide. Now it just naps occasionally," joke number 2, disguised as philosophy. "The tricky part," she adds, "is that the heart doesn't lie. It just changes its handwriting." Somewhere outside, a wind chime sings in agreement. Your historical fact arrives like punctuation. In the 19th century Japan, samurai believed a person's true self resided not in the mind, but in the kokoro, the heart-mind, where thought and emotion coexisted as equals. Luna would have approved. She'd probably argue that Western rationalism owes the universe an apology. Scholars, she says, are still debating whether reason can coexist with wonder. "I think they're just jealous of poets. That's your open scholarly debate," served with a grin. Then she closes the notebook and looks straight at you. "I kept every letter," she says softly. "Every apology, every goodbye, every confession that wasn't brave enough to be said aloud. They're not just memories. They're unfinished spells." She gestures toward the old oak chest by the door. "When I die, I want them burned. Not because I'm ashamed, but because love should never fossilize." You try to joke that future historians will be furious, but the words die in your throat. She touches your hand lightly. "Don't worry. The heart keeps better records than paper." The sun shifts, catching her face in a wash of gold. "If the world ever forgets me," she says, "I hope it remembers how I made it laugh." Then she laughs herself, quietly, as if proving her point. The sound is weightless, bright, the kind that belongs to people who've made peace with everything except giving up. "Do you know the secret?" she asks. You shake your head. You have to love the world enough to let it disappoint you, and then love it anyway. You don't answer, because there's nothing to add. The wind carries her words through the open window, scattering them into sunlight. Somewhere beyond the trees, a bell rings faintly, and you realize that the truest thing about Luna Lovegood isn't her strangeness or her brilliance. It's that her heart, stubborn and shining, never learned how to lie. Evening settles gently over the hills, the kind of soft, forgiving light that makes even old scars look like brushstrokes. Luna sits by the window of her small cottage, the lake shimmering below like a memory refusing to fade. The walls are lined with sketches of creatures no one else has ever seen, each drawn with the care of someone cataloging miracles. A kettle hums softly, a ritual she never abandoned. You stand quietly in the doorway, not wanting to disturb the delicate peace that fills the room. "The moon's shy tonight," she says without turning. "It knows I'm watching." She smiles faintly and pours 2 cups of tea, as if this is a scene you've both rehearsed 1,000 times. The air smells of lavender and rain. "You ever notice," she continues, "that goodbye and goodnight feel like cousins who can't stop visiting?" Her hair is streaked with silver now, but her eyes still hold that same impossible brightness, the kind that refuses to surrender even to time. On the table lies her last manuscript, Invisible Things That Saved the World. She taps the cover proudly. "It's not finished," she admits. "But then again, neither am I." That's her last joke, light but unflinching. She stirs her tea, the spoon clinking like a clock she no longer obeys. "Do you remember what I said about hearts?" she asks. "They never lie. Mine says it's tired, but happy." You want to tell her that the world feels less strange when she's in it, but she interrupts gently. "That's the point. It's supposed to stay strange. Otherwise, what would we dream about?" Outside, the night gathers its courage. The stars begin to appear one by one, as if reporting for duty. Luna watches them with the same reverence she once gave to invisible beasts and impossible truths. "I like to think," she murmurs, "that every star is a story someone finally believed in." You nod, though your throat tightens. The silence that follows isn't sad. It's full, rich, like a song remembering its own melody. "When I go," she says quietly, "don't build a statue. Just plant something that refuses to behave." She laughs, soft and genuine, the sound of joy wrapped in memory. "Here's your last historical fact. Ancient astronomers believed that souls became stars, their brightness measured not by virtue, but by wonder. Luna would have loved that, quantifying eternity in lumens of curiosity. She turns to you, eyes glimmering. "Do you think they'll remember?" "Always," you whisper. "Good," she says, leaning back. "Then I can rest, knowing the world stayed curious." The candle beside her flickers, its flame steadying like it knows it's being watched. She closes her eyes, humming something between a lullaby and a secret. The room exhales. When the night deepens, you step outside. The air is cool, carrying the scent of rain and wild mint. Across the lake, the moon finally rises, silver and patient. In its reflection, you see not loss, but continuation, a soft light that doesn't demand to be understood. Somewhere, an owl calls, and the world feels complete in its mystery. You look back at the window. The candle still burns, unwavering. It feels less like an ending and more like a promise, that kindness, absurdity, and wonder will always find a way to survive. The night holds still, listening, and in the hush between breaths, you could swear you hear her voice again, bright, amused, and endlessly calm, saying, "The universe has excellent taste in company." And then there's nothing but the sound of the wind, the quiet shimmer of stars, and the certainty that somewhere out there, Luna Lovegood's laughter is still teaching the dark how to be gentle. The moon rises over the lake like a patient witness, and the cottage at its edge stands silent, save for the whisper of curtains moving in a breeze that doesn't belong to weather. Luna Lovegood is gone, or at least, the version of her that used to trip over sentences and talk to plants in full paragraphs has slipped quietly beyond reach. Yet the world does not feel emptier. It feels rearranged. In Hogwarts, portraits gossip that the air itself has become kinder. The fat friar swears he saw her ghost laughing near the astronomy tower, though ghosts, by definition, prefer to stay miserable. You walk the corridors again, years after her passing, expecting the silence to ache. Instead, it hums. The castle hasn't stopped breathing since she left. It just learned her rhythm. A letter arrives at the school that week, unsigned, written in a hand too light to belong to the living. It reads simply, "Keep watching the sky. The stars like to be noticed." No one claims it. Professor Longbottom hangs it in the greenhouse anyway, framed between moonweed and memory. You wander to the great hall one evening, the tables long since polished of war, and find a group of first years whispering about her. They say she could see things others couldn't, one murmurs. Like what? Another asks. The truth, says the first, and suddenly it doesn't sound like superstition anymore. It's strange how myths begin, not with miracles, but with tone. Luna's name becomes a kind of lullaby for children who can't sleep. Parents tell stories of the witch who spoke to moonlight and convinced nightmares to retire early. Someone paints her portrait on a tapestry, eyes tilted upward, smile mid-thought. The official historians at the ministry roll their eyes, of course, because magic must be catalogued, not worshipped. But in the quiet corners of the world, pubs, libraries, lonely gardens, her story grows wild. There's your historical fact, as always. The human mind is incapable of deleting legends once they've served comfort. Studies on post-war folklore show that every culture invents a figure who personifies endurance, someone gentle enough to be loved, but strange enough to be believed in. Luna, it seems, has volunteered for the position. You visit Xenophilius's rebuilt printing press, now run by apprentices who swear the machinery hums in tune with the old Quibbler theme song. They keep a jar on the counter labeled "For New Theories." No one ever empties it. She'd want people to keep guessing, says one of them, handing you tea brewed with something called existential time. That's how curiosity stays alive, through gossip. The cottage remains untouched. Inside, time behaves politely. It dusts things, but never steals them. The teacups still line the shelves, each with a note in Luna's hand. Don't wash me. I contain history. Her quills are arranged in a glass jar labeled Possible Futures. It feels less like a home and more like an idea still working itself out. At night, you sit in her old chair by the window, where she once spoke of hearts and stars and forgiveness, and watch the lake. Sometimes when the mist drifts low, you swear you hear humming, a soft, absent-minded tune like a spell with no purpose other than being beautiful. You tell yourself it's wind, because pretending not to believe feels like the most Luna thing you can do. In the village, an old wizard swears his crops grew overnight after he whispered her name. In Hogsmeade, a shopkeeper claims a radish plant sprouted from a teaspoon she once used. Scholars, predictably, are unimpressed. Coincidence, they say, because academia has always been allergic to whimsy. But the debate begins anyway, an open question in the Journal of Magical Phenomena. Can emotion leave residue strong enough to alter natural law? You almost laugh reading it. The footnotes cite Luna's existence as anecdotal evidence. She'd love that, being both proof and punchline. Every full moon, students sneak out to the lake and drop letters sealed with wax shaped like dirigible plums. Some write wishes, others confessions. The caretaker finds them floating at dawn, never soggy, never opened. He collects them in a chest marked for the Department of Lost Certainties. One night, you find the courage to write your own. It's simple. You were right about everything. When you toss it onto the water, it doesn't sink. It drifts toward the reflection of the moon, glows faintly, then disappears. You stay long enough to see ripples spread, small, precise, eternal. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. In the 17th century Scotland, witches were said to return as wind, slipping into chimneys to whisper ideas into sleeping minds. If that's true, Luna's been busy. Children across Britain begin waking with dreams of flying creatures made of laughter, of plants that hum lullabies, of silver-haired women telling them to pay better attention. The prophet calls it mass hysteria. You call it recruitment. The ministry eventually opens a small Lovegood wing in the Museum of Magical History, filled with artifacts of questionable authenticity, a cracked flute, a feather made of silver thread, a half-eaten plum preserved in amber. Visitors leave smiling. "I don't understand it," says one witch to her friend. "I just feel lighter." The guide shrugs. "That's normal here." You realize, sitting in that glowing hall of rumors, that Luna's greatest spell wasn't seeing what others couldn't. It was convincing everyone else they might too. Her legacy isn't magic. It's permission. Permission to be absurd, to be kind without credentials, to build reality around compassion instead of proof. Somewhere in that understanding, you hear her voice again, not as echo, but as invitation. Don't get too comfortable. Wonder hates routine. You leave the museum smiling, walking into a night thick with stars, feeling the air shift around you. Not colder, not warmer, just more awake. The night after her memorial, the stars look strangely rearranged, as if they've been gossiping about her and decided to spell out their affection in quiet rebellion against astronomy. From the astronomy tower, Hogwarts feels like a living observatory of grief disguised as wonder. The telescopes hum softly, the portraits keep forgetting their scheduled sleep, and you, notebook in hand, are trying to catalog what can't be measured, the echo of someone who turned reality into an optional guideline. Luna Lovegood has officially entered legend, which in the wizarding world is the most flattering form of misinterpretation. The papers publish tributes ranging from heartfelt to hysterical. The Quibbler releases a special issue titled The World According to Whimsy, while the Daily Prophet grudgingly admits she expanded the ministry's definition of possible, though perhaps unintentionally. You sip tea at her old desk in the rebuilt Ravenclaw common room, surrounded by her sketches pinned to the walls, drawings of invisible creatures, annotated with notes like, "might not exist yet." Check next week. It's hard to tell whether the tears in your eyes are from laughter or longing, probably both. Students start a new elective that year, Experimental Belief Studies. It's not an official class. Professor Longbottom teaches it in secret after hours, but attendance somehow exceeds the Great Hall's capacity. The syllabus consists of one assignment: find something you're not supposed to believe in and prove it kind anyway. Every student passes. The ministry disapproves naturally, which only confirms Luna's influence is alive and well. You overhear two aurors debating whether love-based enchantments should be taxed. One of them argues, "It's too abstract to regulate." The other replies, "So was she." Joke number one lands between policy and poetry. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the evening. Centuries before Hogwarts was founded, Babylonian astronomers cataloged constellations not for navigation, but for storytelling. Each cluster of stars corresponded to a myth about moral endurance, recorded as both science and prayer. That hybrid of faith and observation became the backbone of early astrology, a system Luna would have adored, mostly because it refused to choose between logic and magic. The new charts the students make in her memory follow the same principle. Half fact, half fantasy, all sincerity. They rename one group of stars the Lovegood Spiral, 5 faint points forming a crooked heart. Astronomers insist it's a random alignment. The rest of the world smiles and agrees to disagree. In Diagon Alley, shop windows begin selling Luna lenses. Spectacles enchanted to reveal colors emotions leave behind. They're mostly useless, often blurry, and occasionally make you taste lavender, but they sell out instantly. One reviewer writes, "They don't help me see better, but they help me notice more." Luna would call that success. Joke number 2, accidental and true. The Lovegood Foundation formed soon after, established by friends who never stopped missing her, but decided missing was just a less productive form of loyalty. They fund research into empathic magic, dream preservation, and botanical telepathy, fields previously considered nonsense with charm. Every discovery is published under the motto engraved on her old teapot, "Be ridiculous responsibly." At Hogwarts, the library expands its restricted section to include something called the Room of Forgotten Ideas. It's a small chamber behind the tapestry of Rowena Ravenclaw, accessible only by asking, "What am I not seeing?" Inside, shelves float in mid-air, stacked with notebooks and theories that were once mocked, banned, or unfinished. On the largest shelf sits a journal titled "The Constellations She Left Behind," filled with letters written to Luna by strangers. Poets, dreamers, skeptics, children, even ghosts. Some thank her for believing in them before they existed. Others ask her to visit in their sleep. The librarian swears the book rearranges itself nightly, as if editing its own emotional grammar. It's alive, she tells you. But then again, everything she touched learned how to breathe differently. You walk the corridors late one evening, the castle quiet except for the portraits murmuring about her. The one of Dumbledore near the stairwell smiles faintly. She did what we never could, he says. She made madness fashionable. You laugh softly. Joke number 3. But your chest aches, he adds. And she made reason kinder. The line lingers like perfume in the air. In the Muggle world, her story slips through folklore, the way moonlight slides through curtains. A novelist writes about a woman who could speak to silence. A painter claims to dream in her colors. A small coastal town renames its lighthouse the Lovegood Light. No one notices how these coincidences connect. But if you look closely at the timelines, every act of quiet courage begins the same week she died. Statisticians call it coincidence. Poets call it haunting. You know which side Luna would have taken. Now for your quirky tidbit. In some ancient magical cultures, belief was considered a transferable energy. Priests wore mirrors around their necks to reflect faith back into the world, convinced that attention itself was holy. Maybe that's what Luna did, turned curiosity into a sacred mirror until everyone saw themselves a little gentler. The ministry hosts a formal ceremony the following year, unveiling a bronze statue of her standing with her wand raised toward the stars. It's lovely, dignified, and entirely wrong. She would have hated the seriousness. Someone later sneaks in a painted radish around her neck. The statue smiles faintly by morning. No one can explain it. The guards stop trying. The scholarly debate rages on. Predictably, was Luna Lovegood a visionary or merely a cultural catalyst? Academics write essays about her epistemological elasticity, phrases so self-satisfied they squeak. Meanwhile, her legend expands without asking permission. Children play a new game called Luna's Logic, where the only rule is to find beauty in the least expected object. They play it endlessly and never lose. On the anniversary of her passing, the sky over the Forbidden Forest flashes briefly violet, though there's no storm, no sound, no reason. Someone suggests it's just aurora residue. Others swear it's her saying hello. You step outside to look. The stars above shimmer brighter than you've ever seen, and for a moment you swear you see them rearrange, small luminous dots spelling a single word, continue. You blink and it's gone, but the message lands anyway, somewhere between your ribs and your faith. When you return to her old cottage, the wind pushes the door open before you touch it. The place smells like sage and paper. On the table you find a fresh cup of tea steaming faintly, though no one's been here in years. The liquid glows softly, the color of dusk. You smile and sit, taking a sip that tastes of warmth and disbelief. Outside, the world hums, alive and inconveniently hopeful. Somewhere, in the patient quiet of the sky, Luna Lovegood continues to rearrange the constellations, one impossible heartbeat at a time. The wind returns before dawn, soft and certain, as if the world itself has remembered the tune it forgot to finish. You wake to find the lake unreasonably still, a mirror of liquid silver stretched beneath a sky that looks too clean to be real. Hogwarts sleeps, unaware that something gentle is happening just beyond the edges of understanding. You walk the familiar path past the greenhouses, past the tower that still hums with her laughter, and reach the hill where her statue watches the horizon. The bronze catches the morning light, and for the first time you see it differently, not as a monument, but as an instrument, a silent bell waiting to be played by sunlight. The air vibrates faintly. Maybe it's the wind, maybe it's her. Luna Lovegood was never much for boundaries, not between worlds, not between definitions, not even between being and remembering. You half expect her voice to appear like a thought with impeccable timing. Told you so. You almost laugh and then you do, because if ghosts feed on joy, she deserves a feast. From this hill you can see everything, the castle waking in slow motion, the great hall windows reflecting sunrise, the forest crouched in reverence. There's peace now, Not the manufactured kind born of treaties, but the authentic silence that follows acceptance. People come here often, you've learned, not to mourn, but to reset their senses. Someone once called her grave a compass. It doesn't point north, they said. It points inward. That line ended up carved into stone, though you suspect she'd prefer it scratched onto a napkin instead. A group of students arrives carrying instruments, violins, a flute, a harp strung with thread that glimmers like moonlight. They don't speak. They simply begin to play, a melody without structure, somewhere between hymn and memory. The sound spreads, slow and golden, curling around the towers, reaching into windows, brushing portraits awake. And though no one admits it, every person who hears it weeps a little, the way rain does when it finally understands gravity. Here's your historical fact, tucked between wonder and documentation. During the Renaissance, scholars believed that celestial bodies emitted music of the spheres, a harmony produced by their orbits, inaudible but ever present. They thought the universe was singing constantly, and silence was merely our failure to listen. It's the kind of theory Luna would have adored, science mistaken for poetry. Standing here now, you can almost believe those old astronomers were right. The melody from the hill threads through the dawn, and the sky seems to respond. A shimmer ripples across the horizon, faint but real, and for a heartbeat, you think you hear harmony from above. A cosmic duet, impossible, yet insistent. Down by the water, the reflection of the castle wavers and reforms. For a moment, it looks as though another world is blinking up from beneath the surface, one where Luna still walks through hallways of moonlight, talking to portraits that answer back, and teaching invisible classes about imagination as defense against despair. The air trembles with warmth. You realize this is her final spell, one she never cast deliberately, a world slightly kinder than it should be, stitched together by curiosity and laughter. She never wanted worship, only witnesses. That's joke number 1, though it feels less funny and more like an instruction. A breeze rustles through the nearby trees, scattering silver leaves that glint as they fall. Dirigible plums, someone whispers, but you know better. They're not fruit, they're applause. The forest remembers her too. The centaurs claim the stars realigned the night she died, shifting one constellation to the left as if making room for a new story. Astronomers deny it, of course, because equations don't like sentimentality, but you've checked the charts yourself. They're wrong by exactly one star's width. That's enough proof for you. Here's your quirky tidbit. In medieval monasteries, monks sometimes added small doodles in the margins of illuminated manuscripts, tiny jokes, animals, or angels wearing spectacles, because they believed joy guarded the soul of the text. Luna's life feels like that, a divine doodle in the margins of history that somehow became the reason you read the book twice. She turned solemnity into art, transformed uncertainty into oxygen. That's joke number 2, gentle and inevitable. The scholars still debate her influence. One paper claims her philosophy birthed empathetic logic, a discipline that merges reason and compassion. Another dismisses her as an idealist unsuited to political utility. You imagine Luna reading that with mild amusement and saying, "Exactly." The debate misses the point. She never wanted to change systems. She wanted to change sentences. She made people speak softly, think kindly, and laugh without permission. She gave the world back its curiosity, the one thing it didn't realize it had lost. As the music fades, you stay alone on the hill. The others have gone, leaving footprints shaped like quotation marks. You stare at the statue again, wondering what she'd think of being remembered this way. Probably something like, "Statues are silly, but at least this one gets good sunlight." That's joke number 3. You reach into your coat pocket and find the silver feather she once showed you, the one she said came from a dream. It's still warm, impossibly so. You hold it up to the sky and the light bends around it. For a second, everything glows. The castle, the forest, even your doubt. You hear laughter again, faint but unmistakable. And here, finally comes your open scholarly debate. Philosophers and magizoologists alike now argue whether souls can influence the physical world after death, not as ghosts, but as atmospheres. They call it Lovegood resonance. Some think it's nonsense. Others claim it explains why certain places feel holy without being sacred. The argument remains unresolved because every time someone tries to define it, something unexplainable happens. A flower blooms in winter, an abandoned instrument starts playing, a skeptic smiles for no reason. You know what Luna would say. It's only impossible until it's funny. The sun rises fully now, dissolving the mist and turning the lake into gold. You watch its light climb the statue's bronze form, and for an instant, the metal seems alive. Eyes flickering, lips curved upward. Not a miracle, just her saying goodbye the only way she knows how. Beautifully, absurdly, completely. The moment passes, but the warmth stays. You close your eyes, inhaling air that smells of tea, starlight, and forgiveness. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimes. When you open your eyes, the hill is empty, but the silence isn't lonely. It's full, the same full silence she left behind in every place she ever stood. You start walking back toward the castle, and the wind follows, carrying faint notes of that song from the hill. It grows softer, lighter, until it folds back into the heartbeat of the earth. Maybe that's what eternity sounds like. A melody that refuses to end because it doesn't need to. That night, you dream of Luna, not as a ghost or a saint, but as herself, barefoot and unbothered, standing in a field of glowing plums. "You did well," she says. "You kept listening." You try to reply, but she's already walking away, humming the same tune the stars hum when no one's looking. The dream dissolves into light. You wake before dawn, smiling. Outside, the first bird sings, as if rehearsing the day. The sky is pale, the air patient, and somewhere high above, the constellations shift ever so slightly. One more quiet rearrangement for her collection. And though no one will ever prove it, you know the truth. The universe itself has learned Luna Lovegood's favorite song and will be humming it, softly, forever. End of story. Sweet dreams.